Hi ladies and gentlemen, Chris of the Polish Geek, and welcome to another video, another top 10 list. And this is sort of to prepare for the JOJODAY announcement that's only 2 days at this point, because we're already bracing ourselves that this is gonna be a Steel Ball Run anime announcement. And yep, we are all probably already prepared for it, which in case, God forbid, that's not the case, then we'll probably be disappointed, because get ready, like, if it is really a Steel Ball Run announcement, then I'm gonna totally make a celebration video. I've already been promising so much, although I'll do it later in the day, like in the evening of the Polish time, because I have lots and lots of work this Saturday, so it'll likely be announced at that time, so I'll do it in the evening because of that on Saturday of my time. But let's all keep fingers crossed that this announcement is indeed an announcement of Steel Ball Run anime. But in order to prepare for it, I decided to do my top 10 favorite characters of JoJo's Bizarre Adventure. And if it really is a Steel Ball Run anime announcement, then I'm gonna be doing a lot more of JoJo videos, of course. But as the first JoJo video to prepare for the announcement, which let's all we wish a Steel Ball Run anime, I decided to do my top 10 favorite JoJo characters. And this list admittedly might be a list that might have to be redone in a couple of years, because I've already heard that Steel Ball Run has some of the best characters in JoJo. Like, I know that the new JoJo in there, Johnny Joestar, I learned his name, is apparently one of the most popular characters. So words cannot express how much I'm looking forward to it, but I have ideas for lots of JoJo videos, like ranking the JoJo parts, for example, but I'm planning to do this when Steel Ball Run actually comes out. But for now, welcome to the top 10 characters of JoJo's Bizarre Adventure. And this list was also really tough to compose, because all the parts of JoJo have so many phenomenal casts of characters. That's actually possibly my favorite thing about JoJo's Bizarre Adventure as a whole, and why it's my favorite anime. The selection of characters is just so fantastic, so diverse, so phenomenal, and it's even hard to pick a favorite. Like, this list was literally difficult to compose, like, because there's so many fantastic, phenomenal characters in JoJo. In fact, I actually think it would be easier to count my fingers individual characters I actually don't like, because JoJo has so many fantastic, phenomenal characters, and because of that I'll have to even give some honorable mentions first, because, or maybe even not actually, because I will still have to leave a lot out and that I so much love. So let's just stick with the top 10. So here are my top 10 favorite characters of JoJo's Bizarre Adventure, and as I already said, I had to leave a lot, and I mean a lot, out. Number 10, Koichi Hirose from Diamond is Unbreakable, and I really love Koichi. He's so awesome. Like, Josuke Higashita, and legitimate son of Joseph Joestar, is a really great character and great protagonist, and he might possibly be the most grounded of all the JoJos, but for some reason I really like his friend Koichi Hirose even more, because he's just the type of this friend you have that you can just rely on and all that. And especially I also love that he probably goes for the biggest character development of part 4, Diamond is Unbreakable. I really love how at first he just seems like this kind of helpless, but then gets hit by this stand arrow, and at the first he's about to die, but then because he gets healed by Josuke, he develops a stand and becomes a real badass. I really love those type of characters that on a first glance they seem kind of like wimps, but the more you get to know them, the more badass they seem. But in addition, he's also really funny and a really smart guy, and as I said, most importantly, he's just this type of good friend that you can just completely rely on. And most importantly, he also goes for the biggest character development in Diamond is Unbreakable. So Koichi Hirose at number 10. And at number 9, and this is one of the 2 villains on this list, which was really also hard because all JoJo villains are fantastic, but my 2 favorites are, and coming in number 9 is also from Diamond is Unbreakable, Yoshikage Kira. And yep, he's such an amazing villain. He's this serial killer that just wants to live a quiet life, because in contrast to Dio Brando, who's also an awesome villain by the way, and I really felt guilty about having to leave him out, like he's the most iconic of all the JoJo villains and probably my third favorite actually, and as I said, the most iconic ones, and he's also pretty awesome, so I really felt guilty I had to leave Dio out of this list, but I just think Yoshikage Kira of Diamond is Unbreakable is even better. Like, I just love, as I said, how he's the serial killer that just wants to live a quiet life, but also has weird fetish with female hands. So, as a result, he's a serial killer and also a stand user, but he's just like so evil and despicable. You just love to hate him, but he also looks awesome. I really love how he dresses in those like various suits, like in purple or white, but also the fact that he was able outright to like conceal his identity for so many years just speaks volumes, and it's all thanks to his really powerful stand. And I also love his lines of dialogue and all that, and all the fight scenes with him are really awesome. Like, yep, Yoshikage Kira is one of the greatest JoJo villains. My second favorite, my other favorite villain will come up much later on this list, much higher actually, but Yoshikage Kira is awesome and one of the best anime villains ever. And number 9 on this list. And coming number 8, and that's the protagonist of Golden Wind, Giorno Giovanna. I really love Giorno. He's like only 15 years old, but he's like so wise beyond his years and all, and he also has strong moral code, which I actually share the same moral code as Giorno Giovanna, actually. Maybe that's another reason why I love Giorno so much, but also the way he often struggled in his life, like with making friends and all, especially when he's trying to fit in with Bucciarati's group. Like, Bruno Bucciarati trusts Giorno, but the rest of the crew don't really trust him at first, especially not Abacchio, but I find it pretty relatable to how it was tough for me to fit in with my friends, especially a lot in my younger years. But I also really love the story of Giorno and his passion to defeat an evil crime boss, Diavolo, and all that. And you can see that even though he's a gangster, deep down he's actually a very good person who wants to do what's best for his city of Neapoli. And as I said, I think Giorno is awesome and one of my favorite JoJo protagonists. Oh, and by the way, Giorno's stand, Golden Wind, is one of my favorite stands in all of JoJo history. And coming in number 7, and that's another character from Diamond is Unbreakable, and that's Okuyasu. And I really love Okuyasu. He's just so funny and hilarious, but also has plenty of deep and emotional moments as well. And I really love how he's just such a good friend to Josuke and Koichi. And I would also love that he also goes for a big character development in part 4, just like Koichi. And at first, although quite a different one, because Okuyasu, on the other hand, starts out as this really tough guy, a jerk and a bully who you're just angry at when you first meet him, but very quickly you learn that he's actually, deep down, he's actually a very good person who deeply cares for his father and was mostly acting out like that out of desperation, and also largely an influence on his much worse big brother. And then I really love his friendship and dynamic with Josuke and all, like Josuke being a more serious one, while Okuyasu a more funny one, but also a very good friend you truly can rely on. So that's actually one of the problems of Diamond is Unbreakable. Josuke Higashita is a great character, but I just think that he gets overshadowed by his friends, actually, like Koichi and Okuyasu. And at number 6, and that's one of the best JoJo protagonists, and that's a fan favorite one too actually, and that's Joseph Joestar. And I love Joseph Joestar. I love his character development, how he goes from this bratty, brash teenager to a truly responsible adult who single-handedly saves the world from a big threat, the Pillar Man in this case. But I also love his catchy and funny one-liners that he often starts, such as, And your next sentence will be, and I also really love how funny, but also really impulsive he is and all that, and so charismatic. Like, Joseph Joestar is a fan favorite protagonist for a reason, but I also really love that in part 3 he actually returns, this time as a grandfather and a mentor, and although I get lots of complaints that he kind of got reduced from powerful badass to much less powerful, but story-wise it's actually perfectly justified, because in Battle Tendency he was using Hamon, but in part 3 that's when stands were introduced, and well, at this point Hamon was completely ineffective against stand users, so it's natural that Joseph Joestar's Hamon powers no longer had much effect, really. But it also makes sense in the context of behind the scenes that now he's an old man and a mentor, so it makes no sense for him to be stealing the show, so I don't mind it. But Joseph Joestar is awesome, and he's a fan favorite protagonist for a reason. Coming number 5, and on the other hand, this is a character that really grew on me. Like, I didn't like him at first, but over time now he became one of my favorite JoJos now, and that's the protagonist of Stardust Crusaders, Jotaro Kujo. And yes, I really love Jotaro Kujo now. Like, at the start of part 3, I really didn't like him, especially how he was rude to everyone, including his mother and all that, but by the end of part 3, I came to like him, and then even more started loving him by part 4 and part 6. But what I really love that at first he starts like another of those bratty tough guy teenager that will just beat you up if you annoy him, but then you learn that deep down he's a very good person, and immediately embarks on a quest to save his mother from the curse of Dio. But I also really love his catchy one-liners such as, "Give me a break."
Give me a break.
Good grief. But like, another thing, the reason I think many people didn't like him is because he's such a contrast to his impulsive grandfather Joseph Joestar, but I think it's kind of the point. It would be boring if all the JoJos were the same, so I really love Jotaro's more like this sort of like cool tough guy attitude who doesn't take bullshit and all that. But another thing I love is that he also has one of the most awesome and probably the most powerful stand in the story, Star Platinum, and then in Diamond is Unbreakable, that's when he returns, but he's completely different from how he was in the beginning of Stardust Crusaders, and now he's basically like this sage-like mentor figure, and it all completely makes sense in the context of the story. And then in part 6, this is when he's on the other hand a father to Jolene Kujo, and I really love how he's a loving father and all that. Like, sure, he abandoned her, but it was actually because he had a deep purpose in life, but deep down he was always a loving father who deeply cared for his daughter. So, yep, Jotaro might actually possibly be the most dynamic of all the JoJos, and probably largely because he's also the most recurring JoJo as well, but lots of people don't like Jotaro Kujo, but I think he's awesome, and my second favorite protagonist. And number 4, and that's my favorite JoJo villain of them all, and that's Enrico Pucci. And I really love Enrico Pucci. Like, he is so, like, Enrico Pucci is simply a villain perfection. Like, he's by far the most powerful of all the JoJo villains, and his stand, Made in Heaven, is possibly the most powerful stand in JoJo history, but also he's also the most complex and most sympathetic of all the JoJo villains. Like, you've been watching me, you know, I'm not a huge fan of the Hollywood insistence of making villains sympathetic, but in Enrico Pucci's case, it's done wonderfully, especially that, sure, as I said, he's sympathetic and has a really tragic but also really fascinating backstory that also very much adds overall to him being one of my favorite characters. But sure, as I said, he has this very tragic backstory and all that, but that in no way detracts from his villainy and ruthlessness. Kind of like similar case of Davy Jones from Pirates of the Caribbean, who's also very much a tragic villain, but you can't really say that the tragedy really detracts much from his villainy. And I would say it's a very similar case in the case of Enrico Pucci. And he's also a Catholic priest who who believes he's doing God's work, but because his mind has kind of been twisted by Dio, he kind of twists the beliefs of his religion to suit his agenda, or more specifically Dio's agenda. But also, I really love the voice actor that voiced him in the dub and all that. Like, yep, Enrico Pucci is by far my favorite JoJo villain. As I said, he's the most complex, the most fun to watch, but also the most powerful and the most dangerous in some ways, really. Yep, Enrico Pucci is not only my favorite JoJo villain, but he's actually one of my favorite villains of all time. And from what I've been hearing, I heard that Funny Valentine, a main villain of Steel Ball Run, apparently is also one of the best JoJo villains. So if Steel Ball Run gets announced, I'm really looking forward to see what Funny Valentine will bring to the table. Coming in number 3. And now we're coming to my favorite JoJo protagonist, and that's Jolene Cujo from Stone Ocean. And Jolene Cujo is Jotaro's daughter, and she in some ways kind of resembles her father personality-wise from all the way back in part 3, although I would say she's far more likable at the start of Stone Ocean than Jotaro was at the start of Stardust Crusaders. But yes, you can see a lot of ways, like father, like daughter actually, and I love Jolene Cujo. On one hand, she kind of is a delinquent that gets a lot in trouble, but deep down, she's a really fantastic person who truly cares for her friends. And also, she's really hot too, but I also really love that how she develops this basically older sister, little brother relationship with Emporio, but I also love how much she cares about her friends and is loyal to them, but she's also so badass and a really tough girl that you don't want to mess with. Like, on one hand, she's very compassionate and sensitive, but she's also a very tough person and certainly not vulnerable. She's not like the type of girl you'd really want to get on the bad side with, but as I just said, she's also very much a good person who truly cares for her friends and family and all that. And as I said, she's kind of hot too, but Jolene Cujo is one of my favorite JoJo characters and my favorite JoJo protagonist by far. Number 2, and that's a perfect example of why Stardust Crusaders might be my favorite JoJo part actually, because the supporting characters are just so fantastic. But number 2 is Noriaki Kakyoin, and I really love Noriaki Kakyoin. He's like one of the best JoJo bros ever, and I really love how his backstory is basically kind of sad. It's like this of a lonely young man who had trouble making connections in all his life and all that, but deep down he was always a very good person who very much cared about people and doing what's right, and that he was only able to form close friendships with the Stardust Crusaders because they were the only ones that were able to relate to him, because like nobody in his life was able to see Hierophant Green except Kakyoin, and as a result, that's why he wasn't really able to form any meaningful connections with people. But I also really love his personality. Like, he basically has this also kind of similar to Giorno actually. He has a strong sense of justice and all that, and believes in helping others and doing the right thing. And I also love how he's possibly the most matured of all the group of Stardust Crusaders and the most serious one, and yet that doesn't distract from what an awesome and great character he is. Plus, he's also so smart and intelligent, and he's very good at planning things and figuring out decisions and all that. Plus, he's the one really that discovered the true nature of Dio's stand. But I love Noriaki Kakyoin, and he's actually tied up as my favorite JoJo character if it wasn't for my number 1. Actually, he and my number 1 go back and forth, because my number 1 is another great crusader, Jean-Pierre Polnareff. And as I just said, it really goes back and forth between Polnareff and Noriaki Kakyoin. Like, I really love both of them, but I chose to go with Jean-Pierre Polnareff for this one because he has more screen time, I guess, but I really love Jean-Pierre Polnareff. Like, I really love that he's a loving big brother to his little sister who got killed by Mr. Centerfold, and his character arc at first is about avenging his little sister, which is what every big brother should do, in my opinion. But then he goes also for an amazing character development, because he kind of starts out as kind of like silly, immature, impulsive, and in many ways super relatable. Possibly of all the JoJo characters, I actually relate to Polnareff the most, but then develops into a really true good friend and a companion who truly you can rely on. And he later becomes like, he becomes practically completely different person in part 5 Golden Wind, but we'll get to that soon enough. But as I said, I really love Jean-Pierre Polnareff. As I just said, I relate to him most of all the characters because I really love his personality and all that. Like, as I said, he's impulsive, he's immature, impatient, but he deep down very much cares about doing the right thing. And I also really love how a loving big brother to his little sister is. And I also really love that he's actually French. And if you've been watching my channel for quite a while, you know my sister lives in France, and my niece and nephew were both born in Paris, and they are actually French, so that adds even more to how much I love his character. But he's also so funny too, and has some of the best one-liners in all of JoJo, like
The honor is all mine.
And I also really love his return in Golden Wind, and it's not just like a random cameo, but he very much plays a gigantic role in defeat of Diavolo and his stand King Crimson, and he's practically a completely different character now from how he was in Stardust Crusaders, because now he's practically like this mentor sage-like figure, kind of like Jotaro in Diamond is Unbreakable, and it all makes sense story-wise. But I love Jean-Pierre Polnareff. He's by far my favorite JoJo character, and I think he's awesome. So ladies and gentlemen, here are my 10 favorite JoJo characters. And as I said, this list was very difficult to compose because there are just so many favorite awesome characters. And also remember, this list is very easy subject to change. Like, in fact, when Golden Wind comes out, who knows, I might actually have to redo the list, because I've already been hearing that apparently characters in Steel Ball Run are really awesome. So if Steel Ball Run does get announced, and please let it be announced, then when it finishes I might have to redo the list, because as I just said, I constantly hear that Steel Ball Run has some of the best JoJo characters. But again, ladies and gentlemen, thank you for checking out my list of top 10 favorite JoJo characters. And what are your favorite JoJo characters? Please let me know in the comments. Please subscribe to this channel. Please press the like button. And let's all now prepare in 2 days for the announcement of Steel Ball Run anime. Let's all now get excited, because Steel Ball Run is about to get announced, and soon there will be a celebration video on this channel. So, again, subscribe to this channel, press the like button, let me know your top 10 favorite JoJo characters in the comments, and let's all get ready for Steel Ball Run announcement. And talk to you then. Bye.